Are we live?
We are live.
Right, well,
And people are joining, which is brilliant. Welcome,
yeah.
everybody.
Takes a little while, I think, for everyone to pile in, doesn't
Yes,
it?
it does.
Yeah.
A couple of minutes.
Well, should we do some introductions? I'm Alison,
Yes.
and you are
Laura.
yeah. We are both founders of the school, which we started 5 years ago. I know there's a lot of new people here today, so we are going to give a little bit of intro to the school. But should we just let everyone sort of come in first of all?
Yes, I think so. It usually takes a minute or so to let everybody in. I'm trying not to budge any. We've got quite a lot of equipment today. I'm
Awful lot
trying
of
not to
equipment.
budge it.
And we've got a tea and coffee coming any minute now, so we
I
need
know,
that,
that's
don't we?
exciting.
Laura, it is worth saying, isn't it? Hello 2025. It's the 5th time we've done a Hello event.
It is.
Yeah.
It is the fifth time we've done a Hello event. Now, obviously, we would say all of our events are
Here
popular.
is tea and coffee.
Here is tea and
Yeah,
coffee, hopefully.
yeah.
All of our events are popular, but I think our Hellos are like the most popular event of the year.
Yeah, because it's a nice sort of foundation, I
Mhm.
think, opportunity to kind of take a step back. And importantly, I think kind of what is coming next in a world that continues to change quite a lot.
Yes.
So Laura, let's start because I'm conscious of time. We've got a lot to
Yeah, we've
squeeze
got
in today, haven't
bumper
we? Yeah.
bumper hour for
Yeah.
everybody.
What I'd like to reflect on before we look at our predictions for this year is really just why we exist as a business. And I think it's to help people become more customer centric because we believe if you're not customer centric, you're losing.
Yeah, absolutely. And this isn't about the kind of customer centricity that is almost kind of lip for service, a we should, a kind of customer week. This is about absolutely being kind of sewn into everybody across the organization, and feeling really as though kind of customer understanding and customer instinct is at the core of the business.
Yeah, and I guess, many years ago when I was drawn to go into Insight, it was partly because I wanted to champion real people within a business. And if that's like something that just drives me at a values level, it turns out that it's pretty important for businesses to be customer centric.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's loads of literature on this as well. There's a huge number of studies, and we've done a lot of research, as you might imagine. And these numbers on here are from Deloitte, but there's lots of other players who've done these studies, the likes of Gallup. And I think it is incredible when you see the sort of pounds value attached to really seeing the customer at the heart of things. I'm always drawn to that absenteeism
Yeah, it's
statistic.
brilliant, isn't it? So, yeah, customer centric businesses, much lower levels of absenteeism. And Laura, at the heart, I think that is because people dare to turn up for work in a business that is customer centric on two sides. I think they dare to be part of the conversation, they dare to make decisions, but also they feel like they're doing good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is about a little bit of purpose and a lot of kind of just feeling equipped, that it really makes a difference on.
Yeah. So if customer centricity delivers pounds for a business, you'd expect us to be living in a very buoyant time for customer insight. This chart tells a slightly different story, doesn't it? This is government data on the amount of money that businesses spend on management consultancy and also on advertising and market research. You put advertising and market research together and it's basically listening to and talking to customers. And on that measure, we're not doing too well, pretty flatlining as a business.
Yeah,
Interesting.
really
Yeah.
sluggish, I think, versus something like consultancy, which is, of course, kind of a completely different game, I think, to really kind of listening and understanding consumers. It's that bit kind of more adrift. So they're talking pounds, it's very compelling, very kind of simple, but I think it's absolutely missing the kind of messy complexities of real consumers' lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And we think there's a danger in pursuing that, don't we? And we think that actually the danger is an empathy gap between senior stakeholders and the people that they serve. And we're going to put up a couple of charts, which I think cement, highlight, demonstrate the size of the challenge. So we've got a chart here, Laura. Just narrate this. I have to say this is a lie, but this should be true.
Yes, absolutely. This is a statement from our survey. Lots of people are much worse off than me, cut by household income. Now, this is what I think we'd all like to imagine that we would see, that every time you move an income bracket, you see a little kind of notch up and we get this lovely kind of line. That is a sort of comforting lie. That is in our imagination. If you flip on to the next slide, we get this gulf of a very depressing gulf, I think, the uncomfortable truth. This is real data based off an enormous sample, and it's really depressingly flat, I think. This tells the story of how dispersed we are, that we live life within bubbles, that actually, as you start climbing that household income, we don't get that endorsement that there's more people worse off. I mean, we can't see it. We're sort of blind to it.
Yeah, and I think we hear it play out, don't we, in meetings when people go, "Oh, life is back to normal."
Mm.
Everything seems busy where I live, and that is the empathy gap, the gap between that line and the real numbers. And Laura, that's quite stark, but I think this next chart is another layer on top of that, isn't it? So what we've looked at is the proportion of people in each of these income groups that have had a 5% or higher pay rise in the last year. Fair amount of inequality playing out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's stark, isn't it? To see it there. And I think when we do hear things like, oh, things have settled down, things feel calmer, what people are really saying is things have settled down for me, my world. And I think you can really see how easy it would be for kind of big cheeses or important stakeholders to just be a mile away from where consumers are really coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's the salary side of it. But what we saw throughout last year was a growing difference in behaviors by income group. So this chart here just looks at a metric being allowing myself some treats. We can look in the pandemic as we went into the cost of living crisis, similar kind of behaviors from all groups. But the truth is we've come out of that latter storm very differently by income group. And Laura, we've seen it play out, particularly in the interest people have got in sort of mass affluence, because they're chasing that dark line there.
Yeah, absolutely. They're chasing where there is that little bit more kind of disposable income and kind of potential for extras. I think that this is the sort of thing that's easy to go, oh yeah, get that, know that. And I think it's really important to let these sorts of things kind of soak in and understand some of that empathy gap, actually what the difference is in terms of our personal horizons, what this year might be looking like, what our downtime might look like, what that sense of spending time well and I'm sort of progressing in life might really look like. There are stark differences here.
Huge differences. And I guess that is where the score comes in, doesn't it? It helps brands kind of understand everything that is going on in a consumer's world so that they can kind of put that network of all of the impacts together. And I think that particularly gives you visibility about what might come next in consumers' life. Now, that's our vision, isn't it? The whole, it's something I've always been drawn to. It's something, somebody like Steve Jobs would have absolutely advocated, isn't it? Observe people in their life and you'll work out how you can play a very meaningful role in it. The truth is many brands just want their NPS program, their brand tracker, and want to ignore the rest of it.
Yeah, I think that there's a sort of comfort, isn't there, in looking at what's kind of right in front of us. It feels like that's where the immediate kind of threat and opportunity is, but that is just not true. This is a zero-sum game when it comes to people spending money or energy or attention. And I think you've got to understand that whole. You've got to see the moving parts to really be able to look forward and deliver.
Yeah. So in a moment, we are going to go on and describe 10 bold predictions for this year. Before we do that, and I know there's a lot of new people on the call today, I just want to really point out that it is based on a lot of time, effort, and a huge amount of data, isn't it, to come to some of these conclusions. So scale it for the people who are listening today.
Yeah, 2,000 sample every single week. And there's something nice about a 2,000 number that almost makes us be a little bit number blind, I think. That is huge every single week. It makes it 4 times more robust than some of the kind of consumer confidence metrics we might be used to. We've been running this now for 5 years, a phenomenal number of questions, 18,000 plus questions. And I think that we've got that beautiful blend between everything you would want to see a lovely trend line on and really understand longitudinally how things are shifting, and actually having some kind of freshness in there so we can chase new opportunities. And of course, it's all underpinned by a qualitative community who we speak to really regularly and really just gives us a sense of what's really going on, illuminates kind of real people, real stories.
Yeah, absolutely. So 18,000 sounds an awful lot. And actually, a lot of people say, oh, the last thing we need is another bit of data. We've got so much data in our business. Well, I think at our heart, Laura, we believe we're storytellers. We believe it's our job to analyze that 18,000, different questions and be able to synthesize that into meaningful analysis for brands to then be able to act on. Of course, for people who subscribe to the score, they can get access to all of the data that sits beneath it. But what we have got now, I think, Laura, is 40 minutes to demonstrate that we have got something useful to say.
Yes, absolutely.
So there we have it. That is the score, and that's what we've been up to for the last 5 years of our life, and just about every single week, without exception.
Do you want to run our poll?
Oh, there's a poll. Yeah.
Yes.
Very good.
Is now a good time?
Now's perfect time. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to run a quick poll. Really interested to know. We want to empathise, I guess, with the situation you guys find yourselves in your businesses. And so I'm going to launch a poll about consumer centricity. And I'm just really interested to know, like, how is it in your business? Is your business absolutely nailing it, understanding every kind of inch of that globe? Or are you really sort of feel yourself just shouting into the wind and anything in
Some
between?
people are literally shouting into the wind. Well, we're with you.
Well, hey, thanks for voting. I'm going to leave it open just for a couple more seconds, and then we are going to move on to our big reveal 2025.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people saying a lot of talk and a little
Yeah.
action. I mean, it is one of those say-do gap, I think, in business, isn't it? It makes such sense to do it, yet on a day-to-day basis, we're much more worried about our own world.
I really like that. I mean, a lot of people do sit in work in progress, and I think that's so true, isn't it? It's very difficult to keep up with this sort of thing. It is relentless, isn't it? I think constantly kind of understanding. You need sort of tools to be able to do that.
And you know, Laura, it's one of those things that the more you do, the more you realize there is to be done as well. Okay, let's move on then. So what we want to do is really start by thinking about the platform, the big forces that are going to shape 2025. And we sort of synthesize them into two very different forces at play. One we've kind of called storm, which is kind of chaos, and the other we've called slump, which is the decay that we are now facing in many parts of our life. Now, both of these are very uncomfortable forces. So the really big question for brands, which we're going to address, is how are people going to react to these?
Yeah, absolutely. And they really are sort of chalk and cheese, aren't they? One is a sense of you can't keep up with change, and another is a sense of sort of slow kind of erosion. Day to day doesn't feel very different, but over time you think, oh, where's it gone?
Yeah. And I kind of, I think there's a certainty that it's kind of moving in the wrong direction for a lot of people. So I want to consider the first of these, and that is storm. We've got a chart on the left-hand side, which just asks a simple question: how much change is there in the world right now? I mean, very clear answer to that. There's a lot going on.
Phenomenal change, I think. I've looked after the qual side of this study since its beginning, and one of the things I've heard the most from people is it's like we're living in a movie. This is an episode of Black Mirror, kind of alien regenerates, what's happening now? And I do think it's a sense of constant change to the point that people often feel sort of shocked but not surprised. There's also almost a sense of, do you know what, I can believe it. And that feels kind of very difficult. It's kind of what wave's going to hit next.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we just look at two very recent twists to this story. And the first one is Trump. And I think, you know, when you said, I can't believe it, but I can, this is people's reaction, wasn't it, to the re-election, the biggest political, I think, comeback in history. So Trump is back. But when we're asking people very recently kind of what they're feeling about that, is he's back. It's sort of shocking, but not shocking at the same time, but absolutely certain he's back to make a big statement.
Yeah, this sort of 2.0 version feels more kind of explosive, doesn't it? It's going to be kind of bolder, bigger action, faster action, a real sense of, right, this is going to be different.
Yeah. Another story, of course, has caught us over the last week, and that is the story of AI. And AI, for certain, is a storm, isn't it? And in any storm, we've reflected on this kind of Chinese character for crisis. There are winners and kind of losers, because change creates energy. And I mean, in many ways, we kind of live in a winner-takes-all kind of world. And so AI is a storm. I just want to size just how significant these twists in the story are. So here's a story of a week ago, the Chinese AI platform kind of burst onto the scene. I mean, interestingly, we started playing with it a week ago as well, and we were testing it alongside the OpenAI, the sort of pro model of OpenAI, and it was performing brilliantly. So within 7 days, though, that has caused a ripple across the world. And then yesterday, we hear that NVIDIA, the chip manufacturer, lost 482 billion pounds. Now that is a storm, isn't it? That's so much money.
Oh, it's just incredible. I mean, we were sizing it, weren't we? Because we know that we're number blind, and it's very hard to get your head around those sorts of numbers. So it's 73 times M&S, which is just
Yeah.
phenomenal. I think really interesting. Goes to speak to the pace of change in this storm, doesn't it? Because at the inauguration, you would have seen the sort of tech guys right kind of front and center, and almost this is just an absolute tidal wave in that just 1 week on.
Yeah, absolutely. Very smugly holding on to power, in the days after that, announced huge developments in this area. And then, yeah, it's all turned on its head within a week. So I think that is the story of the storm, isn't it? Phenomenal change happening very rapidly around us. So the other side of this force is what we've called the slump. Now, in a way, optimism kind of really brings to life the slump on an individual consumer basis. So the turquoise area is the world, our world, through two storms, wasn't it? The pandemic storm and then the cost of living storm. But the upshot, the slump is now really, isn't it, Laura? The optimism is nowhere near where it used to be.
Yeah, we saw a really long period of stability on that net optimism, and we haven't been close to it for a very long time. Now, you could look at this glass half full and say, over recent years, we've regained a little bit of optimism, but we are still a long way off. Everything that is the gap between those blue and yellow bars is a sense of a loss of progress, a loss of kind of control, that sensation that just things aren't moving the way that we would like them to. And I think, we've talked about that optimism being like recovering kind of from a bad cold, really. Actually, yeah, things feel slightly better than they did a couple of days ago, but please don't throw anything difficult at me. And I think that's the kind of mood of right now.
Yeah. So optimism, yeah, highlighting kind of the slump kind of force that we're talking about. We just want to look into the future and kind of understand what's next by way of slump. And so this chart here looks at year-on-year change in GDP. Of course, it's the reality up to a point, and then we get the last 5 bars on there are predictions for the future. And Laura, it's sobering to look at that prediction.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, how many times have we heard the word unprecedented? But really, looking at that projection on growth, we've not seen a kind of slump like it for a long time. We've drawn a line across that 2% point growth, because where economists generally believe is a good place for you to sit. And we just are below that for such a long time, a bit of a sugar rush this year. But other than that, very low, I think.
Yeah. So we are going to go on to explain how we think this slump and storm is going to play out. But I think before we do that, it's just the obvious point that you're going to have to stay on top of this. It's moving fast. And what consumers need from brands is also therefore changing a lot as we move along. We just want to demonstrate, coming back to the notion of customer centricity, that it does pay off. And so we luckily have worked with 24 brands that are in the FTSE 350 for 5 years since the beginning of this study. And Laura, just remind and highlight the performance of these brands.
I mean, it's just phenomenal, isn't it? When you look at before the 5 years before the score and what we're looking at now, huge upsides. And I think that goes to speak of two things. One, brands that really take customer centricity seriously. I mean, brands on this list would talk about customer obsession. They would be having areas of the score pumping through to their commercial teams, their legal teams. They would absolutely be kind of poster kids for customer centricity. And of course, they've got tools that enable them to unlock that.
Yeah. So really nice performance for the brands that have worked with us. Of course, there is a very big group of the FTSE 350 that are not working with us. And we've had quite a lot of conversations with those brands over that time. And Laura, often this is the sort of thing they say to us, isn't it? When we say, hey, we think we can help you be customer centric, and customer centricity pays off.
Yeah, I think there is a sense of, that whole globe that we showed, and actually just the sort of homing draw of going back to your bit. What does that mean for, and really wanting to get to kind of quite a specific and kind of niche so what for every single insight. And I think our perspective is you can activate way beyond that very kind of laser-like tunnel vision hour part of the globe.
Yeah, because I think you've built a chart here, and hopefully we're going to help people move along this chart today in the rest of the discussion. But we believe that insights, where every chart has a so what attached to it, is the yellow line. It works to a point, and it slowly helps incremental improvement across the business. But the real win is on the sort of insight that runs through everybody's veins, and that's compound insight.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where you're really building brilliant gut instinct. You are managing to kind of step over that empathy kind of canyon. And actually you've got kind of just great thinking kind of running through people. And so even though you might not be able to ask specific questions about X, Y, and Z, you've got a brilliant sense of what needs to happen there because you've got this really grounded understanding.
Yeah. And Laura, I am a kind of a big picture kind of person. I like to have a framework, and then I kind of understand the world and I can fit anything into it. So what we are going to do now is set up a framework, I think, to really work with 2025. So we've highlighted the two big forces of 2025, and this is the storm that's going on, and also the slump that's running alongside of it. And in terms of how consumers are going to respond to that, because these are two very different forces, we think the response is actually going to be incredibly varied. And so we think the slump-like influence is going to make us sort of lean in to sort of a slow reaction, recognizing that times are tough, that we're exhausted, and we're going to call upon ourselves to kind of dig deep in terms of a response. And very big opportunities for brands to help us along that journey. At the other side, the storm kind of that is raging is going to make the world feel very volatile. It's going to make things feel urgent. We can't wait till tomorrow, because even in a week, things can have kind of changed. And that storm is going to make us want to kind of fight or flight. So they're the kind of the dimensions, this sort of continuum of response. What we've done is spent a lot of time creating this grid here, isn't it? Which basically talks about 6 mindsets that kind of fall off that, and a response attached to that.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole way along that continuum, we've got these kind of 6 broad response categories, and you can see the real kind of motivation that underpins each one. Now, I think what we're likely to see unfold this year is different people, different customer groups kind of sit within different areas of these at different moments. And I think that is the killer thing, isn't it? How are people going to respond, and how can we help them move to the right side of it?
Yeah, and individuals may do little bits of many of those things as well. So that now is what we're going to kind of pull together. So that's the framework. Were you going to say
I was
something?
going to say this is like a drum roll moment,
Oh,
but
it is. I think it's one of the, I mean, this is what I always like to do, kind of simplicity, the other side of complexity. And I think that is what we've got to here, isn't it? We've got the two big forces, we've got these sort of 6 underlying territories in terms of kind of motivations and narratives. And then we can create some predictions that sort of sit on top of that. And these, I believe, are beautiful insight platforms. Each of them has got golden opportunities for brands, both in helping us fulfill these ambitions, but also I think in life, if we don't fulfill an ambition, there's a disappointment attached to that. A brand can help us overcome that. Or I think on some of them, the danger is we take them too far and we kind of become a victim of our own success, and that actually inhibits behavior in other areas. So, I mean, the obvious thing is we become too slow or become too flighty, and neither of those are going to be terribly good for us. So packed in this chart here, I think, is just a lot of commercial opportunity for brands. So let's unpick them. So the first one, bunker and bank. So, Laura, the mindset here is we know there's a lot of change going on. Some of it is massive and some of it is slow decay. But whichever way I look, that doesn't look a good future. So in uncertain times ahead, the sensible thing for me to do is to play it safe, because if I play it safe, I've learned that I feel more grounded. That's good for my sanity. And particularly, I'm going to play it safe with my money because I've learned that you need a bit of a buffer in life to get through. So if that's the mindset, how is this going to play out?
Well, I think we're going to see a huge kind of focus on our own kind of personal fortress, a desire to kind of block out some of that bad, focusing on what we can control. I think our homes will absolutely be at the centre of that. I think a lot of this is about sort of keeping a really kind of sharp eye, keeping smart, keeping vigilant. And I think, you can see that sense of vigilance really coming through. This is our views on the UK economy over on the right there. And you can see people are already sensing that we're kind of headed for a recession. That is that kind of vigilance, kind of watch out, watch your back, and I think kind of react, isn't it? This is a sense that there isn't kind of an overnight kind of win here. I've got to kind of just weather this.
Yeah, it's hunker down, isn't it? It's be very, very sensible. So we think there are two very big opportunity spaces around this. And one is just help us make our fortress. We are going to want to spend a lot of time at home. It is absolutely our safe place. We've learned that over many years. And so help us make that place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is about, I mean, it's incredible, isn't it, when we look at how much happiness people are getting from just a kind of clean and tidy and well-maintained home that kind of keeps edging up. I think that sensation of a place that really is a sanctuary, that is a place that we can feel in control, whether that's because of its kind of beauty and how well it works for us, or things like kind of home security, that's absolutely what we're drawn to, and habits and rituals around the home that are going to deliver that sensation of control.
Yeah, absolutely, to protect our well-being. So if our home is important to build our fortress, the other part is once we've got that fortress or castle, we want a moat around it, a financial moat. And so savings are going to be really important to us. Now, really important data on the left-hand side. We have become less terrified about our money. But really interestingly, against the backdrop of being less terrified, we want to be more planned, more well informed, and more considered in our spending. And Laura, that is the visibility that things are not better ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you can just see the sort of content that we're really drawn to at the moment, you can really see that sense of kind of caution and wanting to keep kind of one eye on things, and sort of separate from the pack, almost kind of swim against this tide. We're looking at kind of habits that we know will really keep our spending in check. I think there's a lot of desire to kind of learn how would you budget different things. I think there's also a draw to kind of scores and kind of comparison. We often talk about comparison being the thief of joy, but I think in this sense, this gives us a sense of kind of control, something to work towards, something to measure ourselves against, a sense that actually we are protecting ourselves.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the thing though, that hunker and bank, they're great things to do. But the problem is if we do them too much, we're going to end up with problems attached to that. So the threat that brands can help us guard against is about being overly cautious.
Yeah, I think we can get drawn into being very sort of monitoring, very kind of close on things, and finding that tricky. And I think one of the things that we've definitely seen play out and will continue to see is the endowment effect at play. We are building our savings. We can see that the more we build them, the more attached to them we are. Money saved is worth more than money newly earned. And so I think we could see ourselves getting kind of too tied into the bunker.
Yeah, absolutely. Too much control.
Yeah.
And becoming rigid because of it. Okay, prediction number one we've done. We're going to move on to the second prediction, which we've called selfish question mark. Actually, no, try being, it's the smart way. So the narrative here, the mindset is, it's a bad world out there. I can't control that, but what I can do is control my world. And if I focus on that and I get stable and I start to replenish myself, then I might be able to help other people. So I guess the overall hope here is my own circle of control. It's mine. I'm going to try and ignore what's going on around it. So, Laura, this is about me and sorting out my problems. How does that play out?
I think this is about really kind of focusing in on ourselves, what is right for us at any given moment. Something like sort of personal boundaries, actually kind of saying no, trying to dial it down, isn't laziness. It's not wrong. It's about making really sort of smart choices that kind of feel right for you. This is about not taking on board other people's problems, that desire to kind of fix everything. It's absolutely about kind of focusing in on me and my world.
Yeah. And I think brands can help us here by actually saying, you don't need to apologize for that. It's fine to put yourself first because genuinely you do need your own life jacket on before you can help somebody else. And Laura, on the left-hand side, I'm just going to look at weight management. We've looked at it as a deep dive topic during January. We've looked at it many, many times over the course of the last 5 years. But a really interesting kind of shift this January when we ask people about their motivations. And you can see on the left-hand side, it's always been more, or we like to think that, more for us than for other people. But a very significant jump in that direction. And also a very significant jump in terms of I'm determined to do it, which might blur onto our kind of next prediction, interestingly. But tell us about this more broadly. No apologies. It's okay to do this.
Yes, I think this is, self-focus isn't selfish. And I think there are so many ways that brands can kind of show up in this space and kind of make us feel like we're doing the right things, whether that's sort of celebrating kind of moments where we choose to do things solo, moments where actually we just want really light interaction. We want to be amongst strangers, someone where you don't have to take on board all their problems and entertainment, but you get all the joy of being around people, coffee shops or being kind of drawn to kind of urban locations for days out, that kind of thing. I think anything that really helps put us kind of front and center, whether that's thinking about our career or how we look after ourselves.
Yeah. So big opportunity there for brands. When we look at the sort of threat of this prediction, is that in looking after ourselves, we kind of move away from contact with other people. On the right-hand side, we look at the metric met up with somebody in the last week, and we can see over the last couple of months that's really fallen off last year's line. And it was almost kind of a lead indicator, actually, in terms of feeling a bit more vulnerable about our finances and deciding that the best way to protect them is basically to stay at home.
Yeah, absolutely. We're in way more control, aren't we, if we don't make it up with that wider circle. Of course, the kind of threat here is that goes too far and we end up finding ourselves isolated, that empathy gap widening, us not having the kind of support networks that we really need to rely on. And I think also you actually don't get that kind of sensation. You can kind of get lost in the storm if you're completely isolated, can't you? You don't get that kind of sensation of, oh no, don't everyone worries about that. That's absolutely fine. We're kind of missing those moments.
Yeah. Okay. So that is prediction number 2. Prediction number 3, we've called Armour Up. So this is moving a little bit less from the sort of hunker space, but more to I'm kind of owning the problem and I'm embracing it. I'm trying to kind of move forward within it. This relates specifically, I think, to health and well-being, and we'll come on to demonstrate that in a moment. But this, I think, originates from a sense, a mindset of, life has not been great for quite some time. I felt really quite wobbled and shaken by that. And I know it's not going to be great coming up, but I want to be as good as I can to sort of face that battle. And in facing that battle, I kind of want to be able to go out to the outside world and kind of look like I'm coping. And there's a little bit of sort of faking it till I make it, isn't it? If I look, then maybe that's going to help me kind of feel it. And this is the final part of this is that mindset of tough love. Now, we hinted at it on that chart in the previous section, didn't we? No excuses. I need to make this happen because this is an enduring kind of place that we find ourselves. Laura, chart here about personal priorities. The biggest growth on the right-hand side is around mental well-being, a very big jump up on the year. It now brings mental well-being with physical health and finances sort of in that ultra zone. How does that play out?
Well, this is about sort of staying strong regardless of the chaos, isn't it? This is us really wanting to be quite powerful, I think, and protect ourselves. I do think that proof is such an important part in any of these sort of slump slump trends. We want to be able to kind of show that we're kind of bucking the slump, surviving the slump. And so I think that feels very important. I think starting with some kind of the real sort of like fundamentals of feeling good, feeling strong, feeling ready.
Yeah, and so the opportunity that arises from this really is to build a feeling of everyday strength and resilience in everybody. I've highlighted it on the left-hand side in some emotions linked to kind of weight management, and you can really sense that, can't you? That if we can achieve some of these sort of physical health, mental well-being goals, we not only feel proud, we feel more up for the challenge of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think really sort of boosted, kind of spurred on. I think when you see a lot of the opportunities, I think that's absolutely where they are, create some kind of allure and excitement around this sense of really kind of taking control. It makes it feel quite powerful, I think.
Yeah. The threat here is that we don't manage to armour up and we miss the mark, and therefore we feel kind of exposed without cover. Got a couple of data points on the right hand side there about eating too much and being to the gym. And this is a really good example. We've been trying to build our armour over the last year or so. It's really flattened off in terms of eating too much. I don't think that's because it's job done. It's just because health and well-being is a very nuanced, complicated area that's full of contradictions. So the threat here is we don't manage it, and
Yeah.
opportunity for brands to help.
Yeah, absolutely. That these things are, we struggle with these things, that these things are difficult. So I think absolutely we could end up adrift. I think also there's a sense of us kind of keeping in check. I think that's a real threat. Either we're really hard on ourselves and no amount is enough, or actually we're a bit too kind of light touch on ourselves and things drift. And so I think there is a huge opportunity there for brands to keep us on track.
Yep. Okay, we move on to the next prediction. So we've called this power crawl. This, Laura, I think is the think of 2025. I think if you could encapsulate one thing the nation wants to think about this year, is that they can move slowly but gain power as we move through the year. And the mindset here is, I think it is about the tortoise, isn't it? It's the story of the tortoise versus the hare. It's any progress is better than none. It's if you keep doing a good thing, even if it's a small thing repeatedly, you are going to get to a good place. And actually, I think it's an acknowledgement that often we search for quick fixes, but they never really sort of satisfy us. It's the bar of chocolate, and we still want more after it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, that's in a terrible place for you to.
Yeah, very difficult
Yeah.
to get to the next slide. Yeah, I think that this is absolutely the think of this year. We can sense a sense of rockiness. We want to move towards actually ending up in a different place. And this is about getting people focused on that 1 degree of difference that will make a difference. And I think that can sound quite dull. I think there's a real opportunity around making that sound sort of sexier, which is where you get those kind of atomic habits, I think, a kind of cooler narrative to that. But yeah, this is absolutely about sort of inching forwards in the right direction rather than gambling forwards.
Yeah. And I think why it's kind of the think, it does make a lot of rational sense, doesn't it? But we've also kind of see it play out in one part of our lives, and that is the slow life that we've kind of had to do through the pandemic and then the cost of living crisis has actually been good for our work-life balance. So we've sort of seen it play out in one aspect of our life, but we would like to see that adopted in more aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is about making slow and steady feel fun, feel desirable, feel kind of exciting, for us really to have kind of moments, sort of checkpoint inch stones where we actually really feel like we can see some of this progress rather than kind of feeling too far adrift, being too consistent for too long without seeing results. And I think we see that so much in the sorts of content that we're reaching for, whether that's kind of morning routines and then feeling kind of just quite glam, or whether that's about how we're sleeping or how we're kind of saving. I think this is all about sort of tiny steps moving us forwards.
Absolutely. So if I'm saying that is the think of this year, there is a very big problem kind of facing this ambition, and that is we don't feel as resilient as the tortoise needs to be to make slow and steady progress. data points on the right-hand side prove that.
Yeah, I think you could say that consistency is a challenge for humans kind of generally, but we look really under pressure as we face into this year. Our kind of enthusiasm, our ability to kind of ignore distractions, break old patterns, that sense of resilience and focus is already looking under pressure. And so I think you can really see that things drift without a big kind of alluring dream. We don't have that kind of injection of kind of go for it. It's easy to kind of put things off and snooze.
Yeah. So big opportunities to help us be a tortoise this year. Okay, so the tortoise is the think of this year, is what we want to say. If there was one prediction that you would say applies to the whole nation, that would be it. The truth is, if you said the feel of it, we're not feeling quite as resilient as the tortoise needs to be. So we're very, very likely to actually be drawn to quick fixes. So blink to fix, as we said here. And I think the mindset here is I want to be the tortoise, but actually it's really hard. I don't have the energy today. If I win small today, that's going to put me on a better path. I'm going to feel better. I can start being a tortoise tomorrow. And actually I'll be able to turn up for work and show and tell people I've done something rather than just sit around. So that's kind of the narrative around this. Now, how does this play out?
This is all about instant boosts. This is about sort of shortcuts, moments whereby we feel we move a long way very, very, very quickly. And they are highly desirable to us. Look at the kind of whole world of TikTok. Endlessly, that's what it kind of promises. Instant solutions, 3 how-tos, easy steps, copy this. And I think that is that sensation, isn't it? Tomorrow, things are going to feel better. I'm going to look better. I'm going to have different proof points.
Yeah. So the opportunity space here is really to sell guaranteed success to somebody. I've demonstrated it on the left-hand side with weight loss drugs, just the guaranteed success attached to that. We're increasingly seeing the benefits, more likely to put to one side the problems that might be attached to it. But there are much less extreme versions of this that a lot of people will go for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, this is about feeling that sense of trajectory that we've kind of moved forward and that you've got visual sort of cues for that. I think some of the other areas that we want to move forward on as well, I think seeing kind of neatly parceled up kind of hacks for that, something like health and what we're eating. I think moments whereby we can really see exactly what we need to do, instant sort of transformations, I think.
So if that's the opportunity space to offer guaranteed success, the likelihood is that's not always going to kind of come through. So the threat really is somewhat of a cycle of letdown, isn't it? That we never get to the root cause. We never really get to be the tortoise that kind of moves forward. You've hinted that social media kind of breeds a world of kind of quick fix. And I've put up some information there on influencers that it kind of highlights that we know that there's a problem with them, even though we kind of listen and do what they suggest.
Yeah, there's a big gap on that trust and authenticity between sort of where it is and where we'd kind of really like it to be. And I think a really good example of this would be something like the kind of world of home on sort of social media platforms. Really what we need to do is declutter, organize, sort our minds out, make it kind of an easier place to live, to find things. But what we actually end up doing is, just dress this windowsill with me and add in some kind of more home decor and bring in new boxes and write labels. Actually, they make us instantly feel good. They give us a proof point that we've done something different. If we took a picture, we could see it. But does it make the home run better? Probably not. So I think those are the sorts of traps we could fall into.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move on. Now, I think the last prediction, blink to fix, was sort of moving towards the storm, wasn't it? Because part of the storm, of course, I think is social media. But now we're moving definitely towards the sort of storm response. We've called it hack the system. And I think this is, particularly among slightly younger people, an absolute acceptance that this world has changed beyond all recognition. And it's the sort of story of the billionaires, the tech giants, isn't it? That they've dared to dream. They've gone from zero to legend. They're now like absolute kind of heroes to a lot of people, and an absolute acknowledgement that in this world, you've got to be quite intentional, and the winner kind of takes a disproportionate amount of the take-ins. So that's sort of the backdrop to it, the mindset. How are we seeing this play out?
This is the sense that there's a whole new playbook and we want a piece of it. Where are these secrets? This is about kind of downloading years of somebody else's experience in kind of half an hour, a couple of hours, I think. That's why we see such a rise of the kind of podcasts, that sort of access to some of these people who've absolutely kind of mastered this, who have completely kind of hacked the system. I think it's where we're sort of playing a lot with kind of AI, our interest in careers, in building kind of our understanding of business. It's all about making sure that we are one of the few winners.
Yeah. And incidentally, on those podcasts, they spend a lot of time, don't they, telling you how successful they are, even being very transparent about how much money they make, even from podcasts, never mind more broadly in their lives. So opportunity here really is to start telling or selling the dream that you have got a story, there is a future, despite the world being sort of chaotic, you can take a part of that. There is an advancement possibility for you.
Yeah, you can kind of separate from the pack. There is a progress bar here, and I do think, you know, so many of our sort of status symbols and things have been kind of eroded more recently. This would absolutely be something that gives us a sense that we are on the right track and we are kind of pulling away from that pack. Anything that gives us those insider tips, those secrets. You know, I do think podcasts are huge, and just think about kind of the advertising kind of potential kind of alongside those. I mean, that was something we found actually when we looked at podcasts, wasn't it? That people were kind of listening in such a participatory way that memory recall is better. But I do absolutely think, yes, anything that is about kind of you bucking this trend, your path forward.
I think they are listening because they're learning. It's not just entertainment, is it? It is absolutely self-advancement. Okay, we're going to look at the threats here. And I mean, this is an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think the threats attached to this is that it is a winners take all world. And in people's mind, the winners in this space are often men. In fact, often now when you're talking to people, they're actually struggling to think of women that are very, very on the ascendancy, often white, middle-aged men. And so it's kind of the threats really are the people on the losing side of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Where does this new rule book put kind of fairness and empathy and everyone else? And I do think that there is that kind of sensation. Actually, when we look at kind of power and those who are kind of bucking the trend, there is a synergy between them all, which you can feel kind of very separate from.
Yeah, and it's played out on the right-hand side with just a notch up of concern around gender equality that we're picking up on. Okay, we are getting through these predictions, and we've got one now called inclusive pride. And I hope I do justice in articulating it, because this is a harder one, I think, to kind of feel and kind of, you know, put, I think, accurately sort of represent. But the mindset here is there are a lot of cracks, an awful lot of cracks. And life is bad, and it's bad for a lot of people, particularly kind of the middle ground that have often got forgotten in brand narratives and political narratives, and they want to be back on the agenda as somebody who needs their own kind of hope for the future. And then alongside that, I think with the middle being broken, there's a danger that we just lose pride in the whole and pride in the UK. And so that's the mindset. And so we think, Laura, this is going to play out in changes of what feels right around diversity in particular.
Yeah, I think this is going to be kind of our area of focus, that whether you're a majority or a minority, the aim is a culture that doesn't overlook anybody. I think there is a desire to kind of refocus on sort of local, I think, feeling kind of more united at home. And I think that just that sense that, you know, we can't fix the planet. As you say, the cracks are everywhere. Let's kind of focus in, I think. And when you talk about the cracks, just look at that data on My Life Feels Back to Normal. I mean, two big peaks there. One kind of early 2022, kind of pre the cost of living crisis really kind of biting. And the other was around Freedom Day, which where life was kind of absolute miles from normal. And so that, I think, is the plight of that middle that feels kind of very squeezed.
Yeah, absolutely. So we believe this is a prediction that what will work is sort of honest conversation around life being difficult for an awful lot of people. And we pull out 2 data points which go back to the time of the riots. And we can see here very big kind of endorsement of things like the riots highlight deep division. Government must address the underlying problems here. And Laura, we live in a world where it's very, very hard to talk about these things because social media kind of amplifies and makes everyone very angry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think anything that makes the debate feel, or the discussion feel possible, will be very, very drawn to sort of less weaponized debate, more disagree and agreeably. I also think anything that really champions average people, or even people who do feel in that kind of squeezed middle majority.
Yeah. So we think this is a prediction around prioritizing minorities to making everybody feel important and valued, a narrative of kind of inclusivity. However, we think the threat here is it kind of misses the sort of moment of kind of inclusivity and sort of moves to a more sort of far right kind of narrative, which means the majority get privileged.
Yeah, and the
and
minority
and the
overlooked.
minority kind of get overlooked.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is that sense that could sort of spin too far, dismissing kind of more sort of social justice causes. And yeah, as you say, just pushing the pendulum swings too far.
Too
I think.
far.
So.
Okay, final 2 predictions. So the next prediction, we've called it reclaim real. Now, interestingly, Laura, we think this plays to every single one of those kind of behaviors. So we think it's quite an important one. And this is the mindset that when we think of good times, they're all in the past. They're not now. And actually, on some levels, it's very hard to read a newspaper and see good things. You can't go on social media without people just screaming at one another. And actually, although we forget it all the time, we know that social media has got a lot to answer for.
Yeah.
And so we think people want to reclaim some of the past, some of the realness of our old lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is about getting to a kind of simpler headspace. This is about taking some of the good from the good old days, a slightly kind of lower tech experience, something with a bit more kind of warmth attached to it. I think looking at our sort of anticipated spend over the next year is really illuminating. One, we can see a kind of crunch on some of those essentials, and where we want to put some of that money. There's a real appetite for real things, real moments, doing things, no fakery. It's actually happening, and I am completely a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So opportunity really is for more honest, human, soulful interactions. And Laura, we know the need is there, don't we? Because when we look at day trips last year, the ones that are on the ascendancy, they were basically very low cost, but just interacting with the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of being part of a buzz, being part of a crowd. And I think in there is a sense of kind of alchemy, of real experience. And so I think anything that's live, anything that's alongside other people, that is real, that's happening, even playing, maybe even quite nostalgic kind of board games and things, I think there is just a real kind of comfort and kind of simplicity to that will be very alluring.
Yeah, and the threat, of course, is we don't manage to do this, that our phones, the algorithms are so strong and powerful that we stay digital.
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of stuck romanticizing yesterday. You can really see that. I mean, a lot of that will be kind of loss aversion, as you say, but those numbers are sobering. When you look at, the best part of my life is in the past, broadly similar agreement with that between 18 and 54s.
Yeah, absolutely. So this would just be a moment where we kind of know we want to go back, but we get stuck in today and stuck in our algorithms. Okay, the very last one here. So this is, I think, in the transform space and can play out on many levels. But I think this is an acknowledgement. The mindset is, I need to find my truth in this world that is post-truth, of chaos, where nothing is certain. And actually, bad people seem to get to good places. Maybe I just need to carve out a path, my pace, and kind of own it. And that will be my freedom, my truth.
Yeah.
And so, Laura, chart here is I've reassessed my life, reprioritized some things. Now, we started tracking this in the pandemic because, that's what people said, wasn't it? Oh, this is a moment of reassessment. This is seeing a world I didn't know was possible. we thought it was high then, but it's at peak reassessing here and now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're just constantly seeing kind of alternative possibilities and wanting to believe in those alternative possibilities as well. This is about, happiness for me. I get one life. I'm going to make sure that it's good. I think this is about kind of pivoting towards things that maybe 5 years ago we never dreamed were possible. And now we think, do you know what? I'm going to find a way to make that happen for me.
So the opportunity here is to pivot to happiness, isn't it? To find happy today and make it kind of yours. And we've got lots of data points on the left-hand side about hopes for the new year, and a lot of ascendancy in this territory, and also higher endorsement than just the average of all the hopes that we looked for. Give us some glimpse into the sorts of things people are going to reach for.
Well, I really think like this is moments for kind of playing a trick card, really. I think this is about living a lifestyle that we didn't think was possible. Something like, New Zealand have recently kind of opened up more digital nomads, lots of countries, that sort of a lifestyle. Actually, could I live somewhere completely different? Could I run life kind of completely differently? Could I have a different kind of way of getting my income or how my job works? What does that mean for how I could travel? Can I do something that would mean I'd be able to retire earlier? I think this is about sort of big different moves in the game.
Yeah, and I think the important thing is they are moves for me. So it is back to kind of the danger here is the less collective kind of momentum attached to it. We've got a data point of working from home. Tell us about that, and then more broadly the threat.
Well, I think really interesting, the dark line, what we're actually doing at the moment, and the white line, the hope in the future. And you can see that really we want to work from home more than we currently are. There's still a huge draw to home. And I think, this is exactly one of those moments where we get kind of greater division, less of a kind of empathy gap. Of course, that's kind of not possible for everybody. Not everybody can kind of play that card and get in a different race.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is the data of that. Laura, they are all of our predictions, 9 in total. They play out on that continuum. Hopefully we've demonstrated attached to each of those predictions are brilliant opportunities as a brand, not only in helping us fulfill those dreams, but also in terms of if we don't fulfill them, what's your role there? Or if you over fulfill them, how can you help rein us back in? So hopefully bags of opportunity coming out of that. So a reminder, and just sort of playing through a couple of other thoughts to finish off, we exist to help brands be customer centric. I'm drawn to that because I want the average person to be represented in every boardroom. But irrespective of my wants, it makes financial sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's that moment whereby you really are kind of onto something.
Yeah. We just want to point out, and hopefully we've made this message come through loud and clear, that things change fast in this world that we're tracking. So we're going to reflect back on a data point we shared right at the beginning, which is the number of people who've had a 5% pay increase. We highlighted the inequality of that the rich are getting disproportionate share, and it's massively affected the behaviours that we tracked during 2024. Laura, the latest twist on this story is an important twist.
Yeah, absolutely. You can really see that sort of maybe kind of mass affluence that people would talk about, that over 100K, still true for them. Actually, that one step down, which is still kind of hugely accurate, affluent, and where you would see an awful lot, a disproportionate amount of spend, really kind of under pressure from that. That will be a moment of being kind of slightly blindsided. That will feel like a moment of storm, another moment of squeeze on an extremely kind of important group. And again, another sort of twist in that change tale.
Yeah, and we're already seeing that behavior, that having a big impact now in terms of what they're doing, how much they're spending. And so another really important twist. So that is why we exist. We exist because this is a very fast changing, volatile world, and we want to help brands be customer centric. Very
Brilliant.
good. Any final thoughts, Laura?
Well, I thought that was very good. We are going to, there will be a recording available of this, which we will share. And we would love to know any of these that have really kind of resonated with anyone. Get in touch.
Yeah, and examples of how they're playing out, I guess, in real life. So good luck for 2025. Hopefully, I mean, I think there's some personal learnings in there as well, because I think actually adapting to change, just being able to see what's happening around you is a massive kind of step forward.
Huge.
Very good. Take care.